All aboard! Welcome to the All Aboard podcast. I am your host, Brandon DeFreitas, coming at you on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. Today, we are going to walk through the AFC East in our final segment here with the Miami Dolphins. If you want to go look back at the Patriots, Jets, and Buffalo Bills. We did those in the first two episodes. You can find those on your wherever you get podcasts. And we're going to wrap up the AFC East today and finalize it out with a few observations from the first week of training camp. Most teams returned to training camp. Actually, all of them returned to training camp, but most teams just wrapped up their first full week. So we have a few observations we can point out and discuss from a dynasty perspective. But looking again here for any new listeners, what we're doing is we're going team by team, focusing on divisions as we go. And our goal here is to look at contracts on each team and identify situations for dynasty fantasy football managers to take advantage of, whether it be contracts that indicate who's going to have what role for their upcoming season, or expiring contracts and moves you can get ahead of to get an advantage on your league mates. So we're going division by division. We've wrapped. This is the last installment for the AFC East. And on next week's episode, we're going to go ahead and do the NFC West. And the reason we're going to do the NFC West is none other than I have a few observations I want to get on the record before preseason for the San Francisco 49ers. So we might be a little haphazard in terms of which division we're picking, but we are going to stick in division just to have a little bit of organization for which teams we've hit on and help you guys follow along from home. So that's what we have to look forward to going into next week. But like we said, we're going to start off with the Miami Dolphins this week, and let's hop right into it. As we've been doing with each and every team, we're starting off with the quarterback position. And this one's really interesting because we just covered the Patriots and the Jets and talked about Mac Jones and Zach Wilson going into the second year of their rookie deal. And what we said was, with these rookie deals, you get for the first round picks, you get a 4-year deal plus a 5th-year option. Well, for most of them, it ends up being like a 3-year trial period, because after that 3rd year, the team has to decide if they're going to pick up that 5th-year option. And so that really means you have those 3 years to make that decision. And if you don't pick up the option, a la Daniel Jones and the New York Giants, I think that tells you what the team thinks of a player at that point after 3 seasons. And then you have other situations like Sam Darnold where the option's picked up after a trade, clearly a mistake. And then you look at Lamar Jackson, who's probably the rare scenario where he's playing on the 5th-year option. It's just so unique because he's a player. He's negotiating for himself. He doesn't have an agent at the moment. So when he's negotiating for himself, I think it's just one of those unique scenarios that you almost have to toss out when you're looking at the general situation of what happens. And so typically around the NFL, like, it's just 3-year decision-making period. And that's what you saw with Arizona Cardinals and Kyler Murray. If you show you have potential and you're worth the deal, you're going to get it after your 3rd season. Very rarely do players these days play on their 4th-year deal without getting that extension. So again, a couple key points. After 3 years, you're eligible for an extension. So for quarterbacks who have shown it, we often see that extension at that time. Rarely do we see teams, pick up the 5th-year option and have the player play on the 5th-year option outside of Lamar Jackson. So, looking at Tua compared to Mac and Zach Wilson, he's a year ahead. So if you have one of those two players, you want to listen to this because this is what you're going to be dealing with a year down the road. It's a make or break year for Tua Tagovailoa. And it's not just because the Dolphins went out and brought in all these weapons and you're going to see what Tua is made of this year. That's part of it, but it's also because of this 3rd year situation where they're going to have to decide on his option after the year. So whether or not we agree, I think the Dolphins are going to be pretty certain what direction they're going in after this season. So absolutely critical year for Tua. And That's part of the reason they probably brought in Tyreek Hill, to try to, surround him with all these weapons and be like, all right, we'll know for sure one way or another if he's worth a big extension. Beyond Tua on the depth chart, you have Teddy Bridgewater. He was brought in this offseason on a 1-year, fully guaranteed $6.5 million deal. It's a decent chunk of change to guarantee, especially on a 1-year deal. But I think what this means is he's the clear backup. So he's the guy who's going to play if Tua gets hurt. And Tua's been a player who's missed time in his career so far due to injury. So the Miami Dolphins sort of wanted to protect themselves. And that probably explains the extra commitment they made here on a monetary basis. But if you're in a deep Dynasty Superflex league, as I am, and maybe you're scrounging for quarterbacks to put on your bench, Teddy Bridgewater has to be on your list because, Tua's shown some struggles staying healthy, and he's the next guy up, especially with weapons like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki. He could step in and be a decent super flex option for you. So I think one of the top backups to look at in a deep super flex formats is Teddy Bridgewater. Finally, Skylar Thompson. He was a 7th-round pick for the Dolphins. Really a mobile backup. His potential long-term backup has a lot to prove. It was not a very strong quarterback class, so going at the end of the 7th round sort of tells you what the league thinks of him. But being a dual threat type guy, I think what we've seen in fantasy is those backups are more likely to have relevance than, maybe a pocket passer, because whatever limitations Skylar might have as a passer, he could make up for that on the fantasy, in the fantasy game because of his rushing ability. So absolute and ignore. You don't need to even pick him up in a dynasty league right now, but just keep in mind he's probably going to have a chance to be a long-term backup depending on what he shows in the preseason this year. So just keep that in the back of your mind going forward with the Miami Dolphins. But quarterback situation as a whole, it's pretty clear. Bridgewater's the backup, and Tua Tagovailoa, you're looking at this as his make or break season. We're really going to learn a lot about him this year. So now we're going to move into running backs, and there's a bit more to sink your teeth into here. And this is one of those backfields that fantasy managers, especially in a redraft format, the market's telling you that people aren't 100% sure what to do with the running backs in this backfield. And that anytime you have these ambiguous backfields, as JJ Zacharyson likes to say, great follow, by the way, real analytics guy. He has a podcast too, but you can find him on Twitter. He's one of my favorite guys to listen to. Extremely smart and knows what he's doing, but he's kind of had this ambiguous backfield theory that, high level, I won't get into it, but it's kind of just that you can find value in backfields that are ambiguous because the market is not sure what to do with them and thus prices them a little bit lower. And that's what I think makes Chase Edmonds an interesting buy, because we can look at the contracts to be like, okay, we haven't seen these guys hit the field yet in the preseason, but what did the team think of them when they brought him in? So at running back, you have a couple of holdovers, Myles Gaskin and Salvin Ahmed. But then they brought in 3 running backs, Chase Edmonds, Raheem Mostert, and Sony Michel. And what's interesting about that is Mike McDaniel just came in as the head coach, and, he's installing that San Francisco offense. And he brought in 3 running backs. So that to me says right off the bat, he's not in love with any of the holdovers here on the team. So we'll get to Myles Gaskin in a little bit, but I'd be really concerned in a dynasty format for any value for him. But so they bring in these 3 guys, and we're gonna prioritize spending our time here. 3 new additions to the Dolphins. Chase Edmonds, 2-year, $12 million deal, $6 million guaranteed. Raheem Mostert, 1-year, $2 million deal, $1 million guaranteed. Sony Michel, 1 year, $1.75 million, $850,000 guaranteed. I got to be honest, I'm following the money 100% here because my order is Edmonds, Mostert, and Michel. And I think it really tells you what role they're planning for Chase Edmonds when he gets $6 million guaranteed compared to Raheem Mostert with $1 million and Sony Michel with $850,000. Like combined, they're not even a third of what Chase Edmonds is getting guaranteed. So the team's telling you right off the bat, maybe you can question how much of a load Chase Edmonds can handle, but I think just by these contracts that they handed out this offseason, they're telling you Chase Edmonds is the guy that they're really investing in and putting their chips in. So going back to the ambiguous backfield, he's probably priced. He is priced a little bit lower in a redraft format. And in Dynasty, he's a guy you can trade for. I know my Dynasty, 10-man Dynasty league, I believe it was essentially the third pick in the second round was traded for Chase Edmonds. And a lot of people will be like, wow, that's, a little bit pricey. But at the same time, I think you're getting a player in Chase Edmonds who should be a strong flex with upside for more. In, this Kyle Shanahan offense that Mike McDaniel's bringing over from San Francisco, where the running backs always have a good amount of success. I'm going to do another comparison for you, too, on Chase Edmonds. He reminds me a lot of Jerick McKinnon. When Jerick McKinnon was signed by San Francisco for a bunch of money, the first year, that might have been the first year Kyle Shanahan went to San Fran. And they brought in Jerick McKinnon on a pretty good free agent deal. He ended up tearing his ACL in the preseason. But I think they're similar type players where they were, change of pace, pass catching, slashing backs, more of a quicker type coming, where Kyle Shanahan brought in Jerick McKinnon, and now Mike McDaniel brings in Chase Edmonds, and they're sort of planning that role for him. So I'm a little bit more excited for Chase Edmonds than the market is here because of that. And I really think he's going to get a first crack at this job, especially with the guarantees. Something interesting to point out, too, you're like, okay, well, Brandon, you got $6 million guaranteed. Mostert and Michel are only 1-year deals. So, that guarantee for Chase is over 2 years. Sure, they can spread it that way for the cap, but you dig a little deeper on this contract, Edmonds' base salary is not guaranteed for next year. And that means, so there's only $600,000 dead cap in 2023. So they can move on from Chase Edmonds next offseason pretty easily. And that makes this deal look more like a 1-year deal to me. Because if they can move on, they're just, that second year with no guaranteed base salary is almost just theirs to spread that signing bonus. So, the main guarantee is his 2022 salary plus the signing bonus, not 2023. Really, that extra year, like I said, you're just spreading the signing bonus around. And to take this back, let's dig a little bit deeper into his contract. I want to make sure our listeners really kind of like grasp this and what we're looking at here in the numbers to make this determination, because it can really get confusing sometimes the way the teams do this. But bringing up Chase Edmonds here on Spot Track. I like Spot Track. They have the contract out and all the guarantees. Over the Cap is good as well. So both good websites to use to just get a high level idea of what's going on here with the salary. But so on his contract, $6.1 million guaranteed. Like I said, that's his signing bonus and his 2022 salary. His signing bonus was only $1.2 million. So what the 2-year deal does for you is that $1.2 million is spread across the 2 years. So $600,000 a year on the cap. And that's why his dead cap next year is $600,000, because he's already been paid the 1.2. You're just spreading it over 2 years of the deal. And then the rest of the guarantee, like I said, is only the 2022 salary of $2 million. I actually might have the overall salary wrong here because that's not adding up. But the signing bonus was $4.1 million. So actually they've broken it out a little bit different between the signing bonus and roster bonuses. That's why we're getting a little confused here. But end story, like base salary $2 million in 2022, that's also guaranteed, plus the signing bonus of 1.2 and a roster bonus of 2.9 that's guaranteed in the first year. So all that guaranteed money is in year one. We go to year two, his base salary jumps from $2 million to $5.6 million. And that 5.6, not a dollar of it is guaranteed. Not even a dollar. The only thing that's guaranteed in year 2 is actually nothing. It's just the $600,000 that was spread out from the signing bonus he already received. So effectively, to me, this looks a lot more like a 1-year, $6.1 million deal. That's what it looks like to me. So taking that back, compare that to what the other running backs got, and all of a sudden I'm thinking to myself, okay, I think Chase Edmonds is clearly the guy that they're investing in here at running back. Side note again, talking about that base salary not guaranteed for next year, that probably means they can move on from him quite easily. I mean, $5.6 million that's not chump change to pay for Chase Edmonds, so there's a chance it's just a 1-year type situation for Chase, or they extend him next year to keep him longer. But certainly, it's interesting from a dynasty perspective that you could see this running back position turn over next year again. And I know that was a lot of numbers, but I did kind of want to talk about just sort of how the contracts work, how the signing bonus is spread over the years of the deal, and how you can have these deals structured with non-guaranteed years following, or even they call them like phantom years where the contract like voids before the year, but they're just there to spread the signing bonus for a salary cap purpose. So you can't just look at the overall contract. Like 2-year, $12 million, I don't know, looks more like a 1-year, $6 million to me for Chase Edmonds, but still enough for a dynasty perspective that I'm willing to invest in Chase Edmonds because I think he's going to be a strong flex at least with running back 2 potential this year. And if he plays well, they'll probably extend him and give him more guarantees and spread that salary cap in 2023 out. So that's where I'm looking if I'm playing in the Dolphins backfield. Mostert and Michel, we talked about their 1-year deals, not much guaranteed. I think they're just depth. And, it is going to be, like, I think Chase Edmonds is going to be the lead, but all these teams now are some sort of a committee. So here are your supporting backs in the committee, Mostert and Michel. And I think they'll fight it out for who gets a little bit more of a role. Raheem Mostert, he's not on the camp PUP, so that means they expect him to play sometime in the first 4 games. May or may not be ready for week 1, we'll see. But I think those are your 3 backs to care about. Chase Edmonds and then Mostert and Michel you're looking at as like depth and a running back by committee. Still worth owning in a dynasty because, I don't know, Edmonds could get hurt. He could not be effective. So I think those guys are still well worth the roster spot, but when you dig into their contracts, you can see that the team is not particularly invested in them. Speaking of not invested in them, Myles Gaskin, it's the last year of his rookie deal. He's 25 years old. And again, this is where you remember we talked about the performance escalator. So you get your rookie deal. It's a 4-year deal. But if you have a certain amount of success, it will trigger an escalator on your salary. So now Myles Gaskin in the last year of his rookie deal is owed $2.5 million. And for a player like Myles Gaskin, that's a decent chunk of change for the Dolphins to be laying out. The problem for Myles Gaskin is it's not guaranteed. So the team can move on from him and clear that off the cap. And with the 3 backs ahead of him, and there's a couple of guys here we'll just touch on at the end of the depth chart, I think Myles Gaskin is a strong cut trade candidate for the Miami Dolphins just because he kind of gets hosed by his own success. Like, if he was cheaper, there's a chance he makes the roster as depth, but you're not going to pay your 4th running back $2.5 million when you can cut him for only $21,000 on the cap, dead cap. So I think he's out of there. Whether he's cut or traded, still, a fairly solid player. He's 25 years old. I could see him going to a team to be depth. He's better than some of the backup running backs out there. So if you're the Myles Gaskin owner in Dynasty, I'm not saying cut him. I would probably hold and hope that he gets either traded or cut and signed in a more advantageous position for him on another team. But looking at this contract here and the salary going up and it not being guaranteed, I have a really hard time believing Myles Gaskin is going to make the roster on his current salary. A much more affordable option for the Dolphins would be to go with Salvon Ahmed as their 4th running back. He's 23 years old. He's on a 1-year, $850,000 deal, and then he's a restricted free agent next year. And you see this happen with undrafted free agents. You can't you can't hit unrestricted free agency until you have 4 years in the league. So Salvon Ahmed, he was tendered this year, probably as an exclusive rights free agent, and then he'll be a restricted free agent next year. So a lot of team control on Salvon Ahmed, and he showed some ability. So I think if you're the team, you much rather keep Salvon Ahmed on your bench as your fourth runner than an expensive Myles Gaskin, who you have no control over after this year anyway. The rest of the running backs: Lynn Bowden, Zaquandre White, and Jerry Dokes. Bowden's interesting too because it's a $1 million salary this year with no guarantees in the third year of his rookie deal. So again, it's tough. Like, there's no guarantee, but if he truly outperforms Salvon Ahmed, sure, he could probably be there. But the team really here can move on from Lynn Bowden without much trouble at all. So it's going to be tough for him to make the roster. And then Zaquandre White, he's an undrafted free agent. For the Patriots fans out there, he played with Kevin Harris at the University of South Carolina. So he was a committee back there. He's got some really good quickness, interesting prospect. He's on the Dynasty watch list. I know my Dynasty league is in on these podcasts, and I don't want to reveal too much, but Zaquandre White, I'm keeping an eye on him as an undrafted free agent here with the Dolphins. But best case scenario for him this year is probably making the roster or the practice squad. So it's really a long-term out, but that's it for who's on the roster at running back for the Dolphins. I think I do want to summarize, because this is one of the more interesting teams they're going to run into, being that it really is an ambiguous backfield. The money for Edmonds looks more like a 1-year, $6 million fully guaranteed deal to me. That tells me he's going to have a strong role in the offense. So I'm betting on him in redraft and Dynasty. And Myles Gaskin, like we said, very expendable. I would be fairly shocked if he doesn't get moved this summer. So I don't want to stick it's funny, you don't want to stick your chips too hard on someone and have it not happen and look like a fool. But I'm looking at this money and who they brought in at running back, and I'm having a really hard time seeing Myles Gaskin making this roster this year. All right, moving on to the wide receiver position. And this is the reason everyone's excited for the Miami Dolphins this year. They brought in Tyreek Hill, traded for him. And in addition to what they gave up in the trade package, which was a first-round pick plus, Tyreek Hill, entering his age 28 season, they gave him a 4-year, $120 million extension with $72 million guaranteed. So he's on the hook here. And I think from a dynasty perspective, you're not wondering, what's Tyreek Hill's role? Okay, he's the primary option in the passing game. You don't pay someone $72 million guaranteed not to be your primary weapon. So I think let's look at it more for how many years are the Dolphins betting Tyreek Hill continues to play at an elite level. So I'll go down here. 2022, $6.4 million cap hit and $52.5 million dead cap. So, they're obviously betting for this year, but it's funny the way these contracts work. Like, you can really backload where the cap hits, and you see that right away. You're like, holy crap, he's only making, his cap hit's only $6.4 million this year. So you can really play with those numbers and push out when it hits the cap. And you're going to see when it hits the cap as we go through this. 2023, $31 million cap hit, $46 million dead cap. So 22 and 23, they're betting on him hard. 24, $24 million cap hit. Actually, more like 25. It's $24.8 million. $15 million of that is dead cap. So you're getting to the point where now you're saving $9 million if you move on from him, but it's still $15 million dead cap. So I think the Dolphins here, they're probably betting through 2024. You get to 2025, the salary cap is $28 million, and then $10 million of that is dead cap. So still a decent amount of dead cap there. But 2026 is, I think, where you're like, okay, it's been 4 years. You're entering your 5th year. His cap hit balloons to $50 million with only $5 million of that being dead cap. 2026 is not happening at those amounts. Like, Tyreek Hill would be entering his age 32 season, hitting the cap for $50 million. So, look, this is another one of those situations. Like, holy cow. The base salary, by the way, in 2026 is comical. I think his base salary is $43 million in 2026, but none of it is guaranteed. So that deal just looks like an extra deal to spread his signing bonus through the duration of his contract, because there's no way they're keeping him under that deal in 2026. What does that tell you for Tyreek Hill from a dynasty owner's perspective? Well, he's 28 now. His age 31 season is those 2024 numbers I mentioned with the 10 million dead cap. So I think you're planning for Tyreek Hill. The Dolphins are betting 3 to 4 years of elite play left. And probably in maybe, 3 years of elite play, and the fourth year he's a solid starter. But I think they're betting 4 years here left on Tyreek Hill as a real good option for their team. And 2026 is comically not happening. I mean, I have the full details up on Spot Track now. His base salary in 2025 is 21.8. That jumped to 43.9 million. Not guaranteed in 2026. So again, the whole deal, you're like, wow, 4 years, 120 million. Yeah, well, 44 million of that is just a base salary number that's not guaranteed, and he's never going to see that money. Like, he's going to have to restructure or something. That there's no way the team's paying that to him in his age 32 season. So again, every time you see these contracts come out, don't judge it on the total dollars. Judge it mainly on the guaranteed money. And then when the full details come out, then you can look at it and say, okay, let's take a look here. This is really more like a 4-year deal. And in this case, it's 4 years and he's paid $95 million throughout it. Okay, that, and that's actually like 4 years, including the final year of his current deal. So more like a 3-year extension as opposed to a 4-year extension. But again, dynasty wise, I'm not really worried about Tyreek Hill, declining at any point during the season or any time coming up. I'm more looking at Tyreek Hill as, okay, you're a strong bet for 3 seasons and probably a 4th season from a dynasty perspective. Looking at Jalen Waddle next, these are always really easy with these young players. Like, he's a rookie. He was drafted in the first round, top 10, in fact. So he has that 5th-year option, and he's only in the 2nd year of his rookie deal. He's going to be here for a good amount of time. Might at some point get extended. Similar, I would say. So, like, if you think about all these wide receiver deals we're seeing extensions for this year are from the 2019 draft. Waddle's the 2021 draft. So similar to the quarterbacks, after 3 years in the league, is once you're eligible for that extension, if you've proven it, that's probably what you're going to see with Jalen Waddle too. Rookie record receptions in the NFL, like, really talented player. And I don't have a lot I can dig into because he's just a great young player on a rookie contract. But that said, I want to say, don't forget about him. Like, just because Tyreek Hill's here, Waddle was so successful, and there are a lot of advanced metrics that you've seen out there that show that these players, when they get such a high target share in their rookie season, it's very rare their target share goes down by significantly in their next year. Usually it goes up. So I think I look at this as more of a concentrated attack where it's going to be a lot of Hill and a lot of Jalen Waddle in the offense. Dolphins brought in Cedric Wilson as well this offseason, 26 years old. They brought him in on a 3-year deal, $22 million. And again, we have to look at something else, $12.5 million guaranteed. When you dig into the numbers, this looks more like a 2-year, $14 million deal. The 3rd year is his salary bumps up, and he's at an $8 million cap hit with only $1 million dead cap. So that 3rd year, probably unlikely again. And this is yet just another example on a smaller scale of what we saw with Tyreek Hill and Chase Edmonds, where the Dolphins they have an extra year with a lot that, the money looks good from a base salary perspective, but it's not guaranteed. So sort of look at Cedric Wilson as a 2-year bet, but 2 years, $14 million for a solid receiver who can play slot. Was a little explosive for the Cowboys last year. I'm pretty sure the Dolphins are glad that deal got agreed to before the Christian Kirk deal was signed by the Jacksonville Jaguars, because that changed the entire market. So not a bad little deal for the Dolphins, but this big three is what you can count on from a fantasy perspective. It is going to be Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and a little bit of Cedric Wilson. After that, it gets real dicey. You have Preston Williams, last year of his rookie deal. He's 25 years old. Eric Izukama was a 4th-round pick out of Texas Tech. Could be an interesting dynasty stash, but I mean, you're looking for the 4th receiver in the Miami Dolphins now. Then you have Trent Sherfield, River Craycraft, holdovers from the 49ers. And then Mohamed Sanu, who, again, a guy you see often in the Kyle Shanahan offense, dating back to the Falcons, the 49ers last year. So he comes over with Mike McDaniel as well. So Mike McDaniel's bringing his guys in, and I think there's opportunity here for a 4th receiver. But if I'm putting the bet anywhere, Preston Williams from a previous regime, undrafted free agent, I'm not putting my money there. Sherfield, River Craycraft, they're just kind of bench guys from the 49ers. Mohamed Sanu, nice veteran guy, knows the system, not putting it there. But if I'm stashing a guy in a dynasty format, it's the 4th-round pick, Eric Izukama, who Brandon Howard on The Athletic, he's really good. He was a college football running back. He takes a look at a lot of the college football prospects and points out guys. And Izukama, he had an entire article where he was like, who has a Deebo Samuel-like, skill set? And, again, look, he's not comparing Eric Izukama to Deebo Samuel, but just saying that, like, he has some similar skills in his bag where he can be a guy you can hand the ball off to, run it a little bit, physical player. So Izukama, I think, is a guy that you can have a little bit of interest here in a dynasty format. And as I'm going through this, I'm throwing out Izukama and Saquandre White, like these Dolphins guys who are on my deep watch list in my dynasty league. I'm starting to get a little bit like, come on, like, don't want to reveal too much here, but trying to help all you guys out there, pointing out some interesting prospects, I would say. And look, most of these guys, maybe they don't end up doing a whole lot from a fantasy perspective, but if you're in a deep enough dynasty league, these are the kind of guys you kind of speculate on when you can cheat. Tight end position is a little bit interesting. They have quite a few guys like Mike Gesicki, Durham Smythe, Hunter Long, Adam Shaheen, solid guys. And we see this a lot. Granted, these are holdovers, but in the Kyle Shanahan offense, you see this tight end, a lot of tight ends being used. They like to run the ball a lot. Mike McDaniel was the run game coordinator with the 49ers, so expect heavy tight end sets. They did franchise tag Mike Gesicki, so he's on a 1-year, $10.9 fully guaranteed deal. But the rumor here that we've heard, and it's unconfirmed, just pure rumor, but we can throw some rumor and speculation out there sometimes on the podcast. The rumor is that the Dolphins, after David Njoku was extended, they didn't want to match that deal. And the Njoku deal is 4 years, $54 million, $28 million guaranteed. So it's a good chunk of change. And I think when I look at Mike Gesicki, he would be an unrestricted free agent next year. He's 26 years old, but he's not really a blocker. And the way that this offense likes to work, the Shanahan offense, they want their tight ends blocking. And that, to me, sort of like, I'm not in love with Gesicki in this scheme. And I know George Kittle has had a ton of success with the 49ers, and Gesicki could as a pass catcher, but I just don't think he's the blocker that they want. And I think their unwillingness to really give him that long-term deal yet tells you that I sort of expect him not to be here next season. The deadline to extend franchise players has passed. He'd be more expensive on the franchise. And some team out there that doesn't ask as much from the blocking from their tight ends is probably going to be pretty interested in Mike Gesicki. So I think he was more of a 1 year. We don't have anything ready yet at the tight end position. We'll franchise tag him. They might have hoped to keep him cheaper, but I'm out on Mike Gesicki from fantasy for those reasons. And also for the reasons there's, Durham Smythe has done a couple of things. Adam Shaheen is capable. So I think they're just going to have a lot of guys, and more of the volume is going to be concentrated on the Hill Waddle front. So mostly out on tight end. That said, though, Gesicki, I could see him being gone next year. Durham Smythe is in the final year of his deal. Actually, no, he has 2 years, $7 million left. But the second year has negligible dead cap. So maybe they keep him as a backup, but they could easily move on from him next year. Adam Shaheen is in the last year of his deal at 27 years old. So I think an interesting Dynasty taxi squad sort of stash is Hunter Long, who was a 2021 third-round pick last year from Boston College. He's got 3 years left on his rookie deal. He's 24 years old. And he has a chance heading into his third year next year to potentially be the lead tight end for them, depending on who they bring in. So maybe he wasn't ready this year and they wanted to bring back Mike Gesicki, or maybe they just wanted depth. But I think Hunter Long is a worthwhile stash in a dynasty league because of these guys, of these four guys we talked about, he's the most likely to be around next season. So could have a bigger role heading into next year. Well, that's going to put a bow on the Dolphins' skill position players, and I do want to just go over the highlights again. Tua's in that final year. It's his last chance to earn the fifth-year option, so we're going to learn a whole bunch about him. I'd bet on Chase Edmonds again, and I'd expect Myles Gaskin moved at some point this summer. And then at wide receiver, it's really just Hill and Waddle. Hill, you're looking 3 to 4 years left is what the Dolphins are betting on him contract-wise. And then tight end, take a little bit of a stab at Hunter Long maybe in a deep dynasty league. See if you can stash him. Could end up being a guy with a role heading into next season. All right, with the AFC East completed, that was fun going through the AFC East. I know I mentioned in podcast 1, I've been a lifelong Patriots fan, so I did want to start with the East. But we are going to jump all the way to the NFC West. I almost said across the pond, but that is totally inaccurate. Across the United States, all the way to the West Coast. We're going to talk 49ers, and I haven't decided yet what other team we're going to discuss. Probably not the Seahawks, because I'm sorry, Seahawks fans. Quite the snooze fest right now with Pete Carroll and his establish the run type tendencies. So we'll probably do the 49ers and maybe another team out there in the NFC West next week. But before we jump off the podcast, we have a few minutes here we can spend on training camp headlines. What are the things I've noticed? I'll spend some more time on others, but I do have a list here. Number one, I noted Mekhi Becton being healthy and in shape. Lost a good amount of weight since June. He's going to be playing right tackle for the Jets, but this is important because Becton wasn't a sure thing this season. The beat reporters were unsure. Like, we hadn't seen him. He was injured all last year. He wasn't part of the OTAs, so like they weren't sure what to expect. And if they didn't have Becton healthy, because they didn't go with Ike Ekwonu in the draft, they didn't have many other options there at the tackle position. So they really needed Becton. And for a young ascending Jets offense, I think Becton's a really big storyline having him coming in healthy. So extra confidence for your Jets players here with Mekhi Becton being healthy. Observation number 2, J.K. Dobbins and the Gus Bus with the Baltimore Ravens. Both of them are looking a little iffy for week 1. I know Dobbins challenged Ian Rappaport about being on the PUP list, but both of them are on camp PUP, which means they're eligible for the year-long the beginning of the year PUP, which would be 4 games. Whether or not that happens, we'll see. But if I'm in a deep redraft right now, I'm looking at Mike Davis and I'm looking at Tyler Beatty, because we don't know when Dobbins and Gus Edwards are going to be ready. And if they are ready, they're coming in their first year after an ACL. I lived that with Saquon Barkley last year in a couple of leagues, and they're just not the same. Most players aren't the same in their first year back from an ACL. So there could be opportunity there in one of the league's best rushing offenses. They were still the fourth best rush. They had the fourth most rushing yards last year, despite not having really, a quality running back on the roster. So we saw them go with veterans over Tyson Williams last year. So that's why I think Mike Gesicki is probably more interesting from a redraft perspective than anyone wants to admit. But from a dynasty perspective, I'd put my money on Tyler Beatty more than anything. Shoot upside, talented young running back. He's a little smaller, but he's got a lot of pass game chops too. So I think Tyler Beatty's the more interesting guy here. But a storyline not talked about a ton, I think, is the fact that there could be a lot of opportunity in the Ravens offense for the first 4 weeks of the season, depending on how it goes. So keep an eye there. Green Bay Packers rookie receivers, not Wookiee receivers, this isn't Star Wars, but Romeo Doubs has been turning heads a little bit at training camp, while Christian Watson had a cleanup procedure of some kind on his knee. I shouldn't even say cleanup procedure because we don't know what it is, but he's expected at some point in training camp. But, coming from the FCS, it's tough, like for Christian Watson missing some of training camp. We've seen that with rookie receivers in the past. So Doubs is really going to have the first opportunity for these rookies this year, and I think he's interesting in both redraft and dynasty. Ramondre Stevenson, we mentioned him as going through the Patriots a couple weeks ago, and yeah, like a lot of stuff's coming out of camp that Ramondre is slimmed down. He's been catching passes. Looks like he's the current leader in the clubhouse for the passing game role. J.J. Taylor just hasn't taken advantage of Pierre Strong being out. So I think it's down to really Stevenson, Pierre Strong, Ty Montgomery, Stevenson in the lead. And obviously all that changes if James White comes back healthy. But so far, James White has not been ready to go. So definitely interested more in Stevenson if he gets a pass game role this year than if he's just splitting time with Damian Harris. Buccaneers, good news, bad news. Julio Jones, they signed him and puts a little cold water on my Russell Gage hype for the season. But I almost look at Julio Jones as the Rob Gronkowski replacement in the offense. And I know they play completely different positions, but if you follow Matt Harmon on Reception Perception, he released a review of Julio Jones' season last year after looking at the tape. And Julio's still beating zone coverage inside, but he's no longer beating man coverage on the outside. Mike Evans plays the X receiver role anyway, so I think you're going to see Julio in a tight slot role inside, playing where, commanding the part of the field that Gronk was. And maybe that makes him, a red zone threat for really, we were all hoping it his whole career, but maybe he's more of one this year with the Buccaneers. He's an interesting guy for the end of your bench, for a competitor in a dynasty or in a redraft format. But I do think, and Matt Harmon showed in his success rates, that Julio is not the same player. That's just unfortunately how it is right now. Ryan Jensen, the center, got hurt. We still don't have word on the severity of the injury for the Bucs, but sounds like he's going to be missing a good portion of the season. So that's unfortunate for Ryan Jensen. They have some options in-house. They could sign J.C. Treader. So it hurts, but from a fantasy perspective, I think generally I wouldn't dock any of their players too much for it. I did want to note Juju Smith-Schuster has been turning heads at Kansas City Chiefs practice. If anyone on Twitter, you've seen the Juju highlights come in fast and furious. This is a player who not too long ago was the number one dynasty receiver in startup drafts. And, Ben Roethlisberger really declined. His arm strength went into the toilet towards the end of his career. And maybe that affected Juju. So I know he's been a free agent a couple times, hasn't gotten big money, and that's why I've been sort of steering away. But I'm resetting a little bit, staying water, as the fantasy footballers like to say. And I'm a little bit more interested in